Welcome to the Two Blokes Chatting radio show on 94.7 The Pulse. Music, interviews, news, and, well, Two Blokes Chatting. Now, here are the two blokes.
We are doing a thing that we call Regional Roundup in this segment, and we just like to get around Victoria and talk to people who are in different parts of the state. And today we're heading to the Goulburn Valley, and we're talking to David Booth from Numurkah. G'day, David. Thanks for being a Numurkah correspondent.
Morning, Neil. How are you?
Doing very, very well indeed. The other voice you'll hear very shortly is not John Laws. In fact, it is Rob Cameron. He has the golden tonsils in this part of the world.
David, good morning. Welcome to our little humble radio show, and we love going around the state of Victoria and even other parts of Australia to work out what's going on. And your neck of the woods, very big part of the Victorian agricultural climate. Well, it used to have a lot of dairies and a lot of fruit, but it used to have, and I hope still does, have a very, very solid community. How's life up in Numurkah these days?
It is, and we're smack bang in the middle of the food bowl of Victoria, we like to think of it, perhaps Australia. The sun's shining again. We had an inch of rain overnight, which particularly for the broadacre crops, of which there are a lot in our area, that is just like money falling from the sky. So but the sun's shining again, so those crops will continue to grow through Saturday, no doubt.
Now, we probably should, just before we go too much further, David, explain where Numurkah is, because there'll be people shouting at the radio going, where on earth is Numurkah? We better just clear that one. Rob and I know, but just for those who are not quite sure.
It's about 20 k's from Strathmerton.
Yeah, that's it, absolutely. Just over from Tullagarupna.
Yeah.
I was going to say it's just between Waiai and Wanyoo, but it's perhaps 20 minutes north of Shepparton, about 25 minutes from the Cobram Murray River border, and as Rob says, 15 minutes up the road to Strathmerton, home of the Bulldogs.
Where former Geelong and Sydney player David Polton played and coached many years ago, and he's now back in Geelong, where his life started out. And good morning to you, David, if you are listening, and he probably will be.
I assume your spirits are up a little bit this morning, Neil?
Mine? No, I'm not a Geelong supporter.
No, Neil's a Brisbane supporter.
Brisbane supporter, but
he is a nervous man sitting here, David, I can assure you that. Yes, my spirits are up, certainly as a Catter, a much better outing last night. I think we'll start a distant second favourite next week in the game against Melbourne, but you've got to be in it to win it, David.
Correct.
Tell me about the sporting life up around Numurkah. You're probably involved in some shape or form. Have you seen a change in that over the years as your town maybe changes a little bit?
Yeah, it's look, there has over the longer term. Look, we've got a very strong cricket, summer sport, cricket, tennis, a bit of hockey in Shepparton. Numurkah certainly surrounded by smaller rural towns. Football and netball are the predominant winter sports, and a lot of our community play both. So they'll have traditionally a winter sport and then flip over to summer in some form or another. There's been a little bit of consolidation of communities. I spoke about broadacre cropping earlier, and dairy to a similar level. There were lots of families in the rural setting, and there's been a lot of consolidation of that farmland into larger enterprises. And so with that comes a bit of a shift of families from farming into townships like Numurkah and Nathalia, and certainly regional cities like Shepparton, big towns like Cobram. So a bit of rural movement from land into town. And that's been a trend over many years, I think. There's always constant change in any community, and regional Victoria is no different. The water jobs changed a lot over the years, but fundamentally we still produce a lot of food here. Probably a little bit less dairying, but we are seeing the emergence of nuts and different food types in our area. Which is very interesting, a bit challenging for some, but interesting nonetheless. It's all food, and I guess as people's diets change, our need to produce different food types also changes. So what that means for community and sport is, the same number of teams still exist. We haven't seen too many teams disappear, so, footy and netball teams, we haven't lost too many in recent times. Wanyoo probably hasn't existed for perhaps close to 15 years, but that's probably the exception. There's some there's some tiny little communities that are very, very strong, and sport is what unites them. So some things don't change.
And well done us for overlooking the opportunity to comment when you said there are a whole lot of nuts coming out of Shepparton these days. But because that's just too easy, isn't it, that one? We've obviously seen that your part of the world is in the grip of what the papers like to drum up as a massive cluster around COVID. How has COVID, and certainly most recently the last couple of weeks where that has happened, how's that impacted on the spirits of people around the district? Are they pulling together? Are they concerned? What's the go there?
So full disclosure, I'm the pandemic coordinator with Greater Shepparton City Council. So my life the last couple of weeks has been elbow deep in all things pandemic. The Shepparton community has responded exceptionally well. Very compliant. We had about 15,000 people in isolation over the last 2 weeks, and they're all having their day 13 test at the moment. So to give you an indication, today I think we're reporting one positive case out of over 4,000 tests conducted in recent days. So people have heeded the warning to stay at home. 15,000 people at home. The food supply chain of major supermarkets was dented as most big industry, because a lot of those people are actually employees of local business. So the local community with council partnered to undertake a food relief response, the likes of which we haven't seen probably ever in Shepparton. So over the last 2 weeks, there's been something like 5,000 food pack deliveries delivered locally to those families in isolation. And measured by one case out of 4,000 tests, you'd have to say that compliance of people has been exceptional. So, I say regional Victoria generally, they listen to health advice, and they're very respectful of their role in trying to protect the community.
I remember being in Shepparton in 1983, and obviously Rob wasn't born in those days, so we might just need to fill in a little bit of context. I did teaching rounds at what was then called Wanganui Park Secondary, in fact high school I think in those days, when I was learning to be a teacher. And we lived in Shepparton, there's 4 of us lived in Shepparton for 4 or 5 weeks, which included Ash Wednesday. And because Ash Wednesday didn't impact specifically on the Goulburn Valley, but the response from the community to support the rest of Victoria, coming together, pulling together things like food packages, clothes, all that sort of stuff, I just remember being phenomenal. And it's one of the things I always remember about your part of the world. There's just this massive community spirit and a desire to pull together when times are tough.
Every time something happens, and I guess just structurally, you've got Shepparton is a regional city. Towns like Numurkah and Nathalia, Nagambie to the south, they have populations in the thousands, not tens of thousands. And then around each of those towns, you've got little towns like, as I said, Waiai, Katunga, Wanyoo, Katamatite. And their towns are measured in the hundreds. But they all come together when times are a bit tough. They support each other. But obviously, we look to Shepparton as our regional centre, so that has all the big shops. But our small communities and our small businesses play a really important role. And as I said, the farming community hasn't gone away. It's enjoying, arguably, hopefully another really good season on the back of last season being good. So for all of the doom and gloom of that COVID and the challenges that presents our life, farmers have been very busy over the last couple of years and really productive. And so that's for us, that's quite a shining light. I guess one of the challenges, particularly in horticulture, has been the ability to attract a workforce. That's probably one of the challenges that, as we go into another harvest season later this year, will be a challenge. There has been a reliance on some overseas workers, and obviously with borders closed, that tightens up. So that's probably the pressure on the farming community. But always find a way, that's for sure.
I think the other one that jumps into my mind is the question of, this whole push that's happened in the last 18 months where we've seen people starting to head towards regional Victoria to live. Are you seeing a bit of growth in the region in terms of people coming to live from either Melbourne or some of the other bigger cities around Australia?
Yeah, absolutely. Just tracking, and personally, we've just sold our house, which is a little 5-acre property just out of Numurkah, and we're moving into Numurkah. And so that was not COVID related. We live an idyllic lifestyle out on a little bit of land, and we're moving to a little bit of land, so we're not giving up our lifestyle. But our property's been sold to a Cranbourne East family who's moving from 380 square metres of Cranbourne East paradise to 5 acres in Numurkah. So they're very excited to get out of the city of Melbourne, the broader city of Melbourne. But tracking local real estate pages is breathtaking. Pages that might have had 100 properties for sale are down to 20 and 30 properties for sale. And I know a couple of estate agents simply cannot keep up with properties on their websites. They sell particularly that sort of $250,000 to $400,000 range properties. 3 and 4 bedroom little family homes in towns like Numurkah just get snapped up by either people who are moving or investors. There's been quite a bit of investment by people who have money to spend, and obviously the rental market up here is really tight. So COVID's playing out in very, very different ways for different people. So.
David, just on the COVID thing, when you're in country Victoria, I know down here we're not necessarily casual about COVID, but it might be the odd case pop up. We certainly heard recently about the little scare that popped up in Mildura, but for small towns like Numurkah and all the others you mentioned dotted around Shepparton, did the Shepparton outbreak change the psyche of people that oh my God, it's here, it's on the doorstep?
There's a lot of people who live in Numurkah who work in Shepparton, and that would be true. So from places like Kyabram and Echuca, there are a number of people who live their rural lifestyle, but obviously travel into the regional centre. So it's really interesting when you go, and I've only been to Shepparton a couple of times just to check in on all things food relief, and it's, 15,000 people are at home. The streets are really quiet. But when you come back to a place like Numurkah, who is in the same lockdown restrictions, but people are obviously not in the same number anchored to their home, it's got a different and a more normal feel to it. People are still wearing their masks. If you had have asked any of us 2 years ago, would we all be wandering around with masks on? You would have been laughed at. But people do most things right most of the time. We've got lots of space up here. I think that the inherent protection that we have in regional and rural Victoria is we've got lots of land and lots of fresh air around us, and we can have a conversation with someone without being 2 feet away from them. So I guess we take advantage of that natural advantage and enjoy it for what it offers.
Well, David, we've run out of time. In fact, we've gone a minute or so over, so we won't dilly-dally any longer. But great to have a chat, and thank you so much for speaking in a language where people understand and didn't talk about Kai, Shep and Tat or Toke. By naming the towns in full, we certainly appreciate it.
That's okay. Good to chat, lads.
We'll chat again sometime down the track, I hope.
Really appreciate it, David. All the very best to you and all the folk up there in what is a bit of a high-pressure time.
Beautiful. Lovely. All the best.
Thanks, David.